That is true. World building in 4D is natural. It's a natural thing because for most of you who are probably younger than me, you don't think of these characters as being actually fucking old, but they are old. With Spider Man, we're talking about going back from the 1960s to now. And this is a library book. It is. It was on sale. It's not, but people abuse library books. What's that all about? So this is, some of this art is old and some of it's like refined, remade, rewritten. But you can kind of see how it has changed over the years. Now, so you started out with Peter Parker being Spider-Man. He had uncle and aunt, no parents, right? And then he had all these friends, girls, his girlfriends. Here's old art. There's I think that's Betty Brant. And Mary Jane came later, and then we see the origin. This is the first time we see Spider-Man drawn the way he is, and we learn about his origin story. And we build upon friends upon friends, or people in Spider-Man's life, Peter Parker's life, superheroes he meets from the Marvel universe. You go through the different decades. Here's Spider-Man in the '60s. It's just at this point it's about building all these supervillains like the Green Goblin, like the Rhino, like the Sandman, like Electro, right? And then you go into the '70s, and in that one, you have this was dealing with the death of this is killing off characters. We have built all these people, and then somebody dies. We have these colorful dark characters like Punisher. You have the Kingpin. There was whole Dracula and Morbius. It was a bit darker because while the first few years were about which villain was he going up against, Scorpion or Rhino or Mysterio, here it was more about the relationships between people and the different types of people, magic and deviltry, sorcery. But I'm not so familiar with this one as I am with the '80s because that one you had to deal with Venom, the symbiote, Secret Wars, X-Men. This was more technical minded. The art changed. It wasn't the simple art from the '60s anymore. It was like with the Spider Slayer. The Spider Slayer was a simple robot that looked like it came out of Lost in Space. And then it evolved into something way, way stranger that you could never think or draw. It would have been too obscene to draw a Spider Slayer from the '90s in 1962. And we got the costume change. We have Spider Man the '90s. This one, I have this issue here. I don't have this one. That's Aunt May's death. Kingpin. This was like taking all kinds of gimmicks: maximum carnage, maximum clonage, maximum garbage. You had Carnage and Venom. A lot of these. Look at these radical designs, and this was like the return of Peter Parker's parents, except was it the fake mothers defended Peter Parker from the fake father, and it was all because of the Green Goblin, because Norman Osborn came back, because dead isn't dead, right? Look at all these really complex characters. So you start off with a few characters. You start off with a handful of people, right? Let's see if there's any. I think this is the 2000s somewhere, going into the 2000s. This is the different outfits that he wore. Here is the 2000s. Yeah, Spider-Man 2000. And I'm very familiar with the Ultimate Spider-Man, which had to reboot and start all over because you create alternate universes. There's alternate. Look at Gwen Stacy. Gwen Stacy. There you go. That's Gwen Stacy. Very moody girl. Aunt May. I'm watching, rewatching Beyond the Spider Verse, by the way, and these are all the things beyond it. So Iron Spider, that was from what is it, Civil War. So it's natural for world building because you're looking at decades and decades of work. Now let's go to the grand poobah of all the comic book characters. You see Superman here in Action Comics, and when he first appeared, of course, uh, he first appeared in this way, right? This is the way he appeared. Well, not this. God damn it. Trying to get. Okay, so that's the first appearance, right? Ever. And you go back and you look at these. Look how cartoony he got. But and that'll be for tomorrow's topic about the creator beyond the creator. And right now you're looking at the evolution because he started off with Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, Perry White, right? Or George Taylor, then Perry White. And then you had simple criminals, and then you had Lex Luthor, and then you had the prankster, Toyman, Mixius Bidelik, Metallo, Brainiac, and I do believe there's the second book. And you see the second book, it went from simple, right? Simple cartoon art to more complex, more dynamic drawing. This character has evolved for like 90 years. So I have this comic book. Some of these ones with John Byrne, I do have. This is all, and this one I have for the 50th anniversary of Superman. Shows you how far Superman has come in 90 years. And let's look at Batman for 90 years. Here are all the different versions of Batman, all the people he's met. So when you create a character, you're going to create a character that has supporting casts. You're going to create enemies for that character, whether it's the tax collector, the bookie, the policeman, the school bully, or somebody with powers. And look at all this. The evolution of how a character goes from the 30s to the 90s to 2000s. This is reflecting back as we looked at Batman Begins. And I have some of these issues. And this is Brian Boland. Looking how that character evolves. The last one I'll show you, which is probably one of the easiest ones to show you. Let me move things. Because this is, when I think of the evolution of a character, right? And world building, I think of Superman and Batman and Spider-Man. Spider-Man, when I was a kid, didn't think about it so much because Spider-Man was only 30 years old. He-Man. Now, He-Man, when I was 18, was about 15 years old at that time. So there wasn't a lot to show you. Now, you go back to this. This is how he started out. Just He-Man. Now, remember that the mini comics took a backseat to the figures. But when you saw like Skeletor, Beastman, Tila, and then it evolved, right? You had more characters, more heroes. Art changed. The art changed. There were more villains. Here you had the sorceress look like Tila, and the sorcerer had her own look. There's a lot going on here. So much has changed, right? So much has changed. That eventually you create a multiverse of characters in their own universe. Same thing with Spider-Man, same thing with Superman and Batman. There was a golden age from the 30s to the like early 50s, and the silver age from the 50s to the early 70s, and then the 70s, from the first few years of my childhood was the Bronze Age, and then the modern age was 86 to onward. But there have been I think there should be a division of ages. So notice that there's more complex characters and dialogue. It's not like a children's book anymore. Now you see more characters, more relationships. It's complex. And you start to see more heroes. You start to see more villains, more magic talismans used. Look at this. Look at this. We went from a simple design to more complex. Skeletor's got more plans. It's not so simple anymore. Now it's like here are this new kind of dialogue, what they're saying to each other. That gives its power. You must always remember, no matter how powerful your evil is, Skeletor, it can never be as strong as goodness. So there's more relationships. There's different heroes, different villains, sort of like intermediaries between the simple hero and the villain, like He-Man and Skeletor. You got Multibot, you got Extendar, you got all these different people. And as you go through these, and most of this was focused on the original series, but a few years pass, you got Princess of Power, and that had its own universe because it was Etheria was separate from Eternia to explain why there was no She-Ra around to stop Skeletor. I suppose it could have happened, but it didn't. You get to the space era. This takes a lot of time because you have to go through 1,000 pages. This is the space era, which had to start all over again, had less characters, but it was taking the same people and putting them in another universe almost. But it was the distant future. And this is only 4 issues in. Let me show you. This is the stuff I'm familiar with way more because once this came back, this is a whole reboot, just like John Byrne's Superman, just like Ultimate Spider-Man, just like Frank Miller's Batman. This stuff came back for 2002, and I collected a lot of the comic books. And then you got here's where it gets really cool because now we take the culmination of all this stuff, all these things that you remember. Remember all the stuff that we saw before. Great book right here. And you get to the final battleground. And it's like everything that has accumulated before, everything that you remember, everything that has happened before in the earlier books, now it leads up to this moment. However, even if it is a different continuity, it's like, and there's some more stuff, there's extras, but that's what, and you go to, well, I could just show you from the figure here. And this is the latest version that didn't last too long, did it now? Didn't last too long. Forget Revelation, but that's another universe. But this is a whole different universe. And this is what, 40 plus years, and you have another He-Man, you have another Skeletor, you have another Spider-Man, you have another Superman. So world building, really, whether it's done by a corporation or by the creator, it builds upon not just you're refining the character, you're refining the people around it, the good guys, the supporting cast, the bad guys. Does this character have any pets? Is this character a pet? What is the city the character lives in? Because assuming there's a continuity between one story and the next, how does that build? Is the name changed? What is the time period? Because with Superman, for example, it like most people assumed it was the same exact character, but notice that Lois Lane changed her hairstyle. Clark Kent wore tweed jacket and pants, slacks. It was different. Like everything was changing. It wasn't the 30s with bowler hats and fedoras and those Oldsmobiles and car telephones. You know, you push the light, turn the knob, and all that. Things were changing. You had cellular phones. Things were changing for better or worse. That was over so many years. This is like 50 years here, right? This is about 40, and Batman here, I would say, is about almost 80 on the bottom here, Batman. So what I think of, it's a natural thing. It may have been done. What makes it natural is that it's over time and over so many different writers and artists, so many different people, different hands. Narratives will clash, but I think people will have their favorite ones, whether it's Jerry Siegel, Joe Shuster, Otto Binder, Jack Kirby, Denny O'Neil, Frank Miller, John Byrne. With Spider-Man, you had Mark Bagley, Brian Michael Bendis, Stan Lee, and Steve Ditko. For He-Man, Roger Sweet, right? Mark Taylor, and some of the later artists. Yeah, this is what I like about this book. You went from the original people who were just trying to do the job being a cartoonist, had no real ambition, to when you get to the later writers and artists who grew up with He-Man. So I like the interviews in here, so you could tell the passage of time between writers and artists. And Action Comics, this is the last one I collected. Bob Kane, Bill Finger, to the current ones under Jim Lee, under Jim Lee's administration now. So that's all I want to share. Tomorrow I might be covering the creators. What does it matter if the creator leaves or not? What do you think?